mi tutu. Ele tutu, ana tutu. Tutu ego. Tutu eshu. Kosi eku, kosi ejo, kosi afo, kosi erina, kosi akoba. Aiku babawa. The guana, Goko, Rabia, Meniko, Sherry, Oberiki, Oko, Lake, Leroy, Go Titi, on your Kama, Kolo, Gopo, Tony, Kana, Taela, Go Babawa. I say, a rumor of witness to state. Second on Jerome, you must take your message, you mental of the death, Lord of my sin, the serious spirit about death, you say, in the morning, that was with him, that is just for fortune. It is you, it is, because that's to your bad luck, give their luck. It is over because immortal, my Lord, of the book of the king, perfect enough to wisdom, lot of forbidden knowledge. If we could only know the info and all be well with us. Oh, we could just know the info. We say Ashe. Ashe. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings to my sisters and brothers.
I say.
This evening I'm joining you with my beloved, beautiful sister, Joyous Ram. And we're going to talk about the kingdom of the planet of the earth, of the apes, from the perspective of the Orishas. Now, I'm going to make a connection between the planet of the apes and the Orishas. But first, I'd like to point out a few things. The planet of the apes has been a series of stories that has been taking the world by storm since the 1960s. And much of it reflects how so-called minorities and black people were treated in that particular time and how they felt. Now, one thing that's important is I'm going to talk about a few things, because this could be a pretty touchy subject. A lot of times when we dig back into the 60s and 70s, which is when this movie first came out, there was still blatant racism kind of in your face, disrespect to people of African descent, and those who had certain features from woolly hair, flatter noses, thick lips, and mostly West African features. And a lot of times these features were compared to that of monkeys and apes. Now, I believe this was around maybe 1969 when the first Planet of the Apes movie came out. And it was based on a book written by a Frenchman. And one of the titles was called Monkey Planet. So just a few extra factoids to throw out there. You know, there's a difference between monkeys and apes. They're both considered simians. In fact, they also have humans in that same category. However, monkeys have tails and apes don't have tails. That's the difference. Anyway, it's a minor difference, but just to put things into perspective. Now, we look at movies like King Kong, right? We could see that around that time, there was a paranoia of the black man taking the white woman. And that's talked about in some of the works like Francis Cress Welsing and so forth. And there's also other stories where it talks about an ape who would be chased around and eventually fall to his death or almost fall to his death. This has actually been reenacted on the Donkey Kong video game and everything else. So there's always been this fear of this ape, right? This big black ape. Right? And he climbs on top of the Empire State Building. And the Empire State Building is a phallic symbol. So this has something to do with their fear of genetic annihilation, right? And also keep in mind that this is what the KKK was pushing for. They wanted to make sure that they kept the white race pure. So they focused on things like eugenics and everything else. The big black ape represented the big black man. Also, the white woman represented the purity of their race, in which they were afraid that we would take their women and mongrelize their race from their point of view. So anyway, when we look at all these things, we're noticing that there's a pattern. Even when you look at monkeys and apes and most of the gorillas or should I say all the apes in which they showed in the movie that we're talking about, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, or the Planet of the Apes in general. You have chimpanzees, you have gorillas, and you have, in this case, bonobos, in which the main villain is actually one of the bonobos monkey. And they come from the Congo. Gorillas themselves, they come from close to the Congo as well, in the lush forested areas of Africa. And all the apes that they show in the movie are indigenous to Africa, except the orangutan. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. The orangutan was actually Caesar's advisor. And the orangutan, his name was Maurice. And when you break down the word Maurice and take it back to its etymology, Maurice actually meant dark-skinned person. And the Romans actually used the word Meridius to describe a black person or a person who was melanated, who had come from Mauritania in Africa. So this shows that there's still this collective fear within the psyche of America, of the original people and melanated people taking over. And this is in the form of the book, The Planet of the Apes, and the stories of which comes out of that, right? So the only exception of the apes that did not come out of Africa is, like I said, the orangutan, who comes from Malaysia. And the first character that we are familiar with, who is actually Caesar's advisor, his name was Maurice. You can't get more obvious than that. So where we pick up on this idea, we look at the fact that there is still within a collective psyche the fear of America being lost to melanated people, as well as all the achievements that they claim that they have made, and us taking over. Okay? So whether or not people still openly feel this way, at least the imprint of that is still upon everyone's psyche in this country. Meanwhile, the development of an even greater threat is taking place in the form of artificial intelligence, which to me is more of a threat than any monkey or ape can ever be in this country. One thing is covered in the Planet of the Apes, not only in the 1960 story, but also the more recent trilogy, is that humans bring about their own destruction. In the classic movies, it was through nuclear war. In the second version, that is the latest adaptation in the last 3 movies, which is the new trilogy, it shows that they were taken out by a virus in which humans had created in order to take out Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is the disease that causes you to begin to lose your cognitive faculties. And if it's not treated in time, or after a while, it can even cause you to lose your motor skill or your motor abilities and motor functions. So what was meant to be a cure would actually create a huge plague that begins to either kill humans off or take away their power of speech and reason. In other words, they can no longer tap into the power of the logos. They can no longer tap into the power of divine speech, and they were robbed of their excess of the divine spark of reason, the one thing that's important in making one human. Humans are also called Homo sapiens, and sapien means wise one, or one who had the ability to discern. So they were losing their faculties of discernment. Any civilized culture, the people will develop this faculty, the wisdom faculty. Now taking it back to Orunmila in Ifa, in the Orishas, Orunmila is considered to be the guardian of the secrets in the form of Ifa. His priests are called Babalaos. When you get into metaphysics, you understand the ability to speak also gives you the ability to shape reality with the power of words, and it was through the power of speech in which we're able to communicate and articulate our ideas. However, in many mystical and magical traditions, we learn that our very power of speech helps shape reality, and therefore we must be careful of the very things we utter, hence the ability to utilize spells. When you look into some of the Abrahamic faiths, like for instance, even the Quran, it talks about how Allah created the universe with a command. We said kun fayakun. And even the Christian Bible, it talks about in the beginning being the word. When you get into the Yoruba teachings, it talks about the ability of the tongue to either make you or break you. See? So Now, I also would like to make sure that my sister gets to also speak her part. So if you got anything to say about this that's wrong, go ahead and lay it on us.
All right. See, well, so from my perspective, immediately, we're going to look at the color blue in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Recent times in my life, like the past 4 months, the color blue of this type just keeps popping up in my life, whether it's wall decorations in my home or nail polish, et cetera, et cetera. So once I started seeing this blue color, when I saw the movie, I was like, his mom's blanket is blue.
Mm-hmm.
The girl, May, she got on all blue. And then after the movie, I was seeing, when preparing for this show, I was seeing how, not even that, I saw her eyes were blue during the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this brought me the idea and the thought of Yimoya.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I was connecting with the eye color and all of this blue in the movie, then I saw and I went to look, like most of the other characters, their eyes are dark brown or black.
Mm-hmm.
And then Noah, his eyes are green. So which would take me over to the third part of our series coming up. And we'll talk more about that then. But I know you may reference, okay, so May, we right quick, I'm gonna flip over to another subject and come back to the blue. So right quick, this character, the lady, her name is May. It's spelled M-A-E. And Khepra, you have pointed out how the movie came out in the month of May.
Right.
And you also mentioned the April showers, May flowers. So then I looked and I saw that the flowers that bloom in May, they have the iris. And the iris indicates the eye, sight. And May in the movie had she had the sight. She had played like unknowing. She played as the other humans without thought and affected by the virus, but she was actually intelligent. She had sight. Now, also in this movie, they had called her, Raka had mentioned to Noah that when they first came upon her and were interacting with her, Raka mentioned her name is Nova. So there's also a lot of star reference in here, also in regards to the telescope and how this movie links in to the timeline of the Planet of the Apes. And we're going to look at that some more. And so also, May was quick to tell them, I have a name.
Right.
She said, don't name me Nova. My name ain't Nova. And Nova is the name that they gave all of the women humans. So, yeah, then I took it back to the flower and the blue in the movie. So, and then when we talk about the water in the course of the movie, which we will talk more about over the 3 parts of this series, the water was a big main factor in this movie. And we know also that water is flow and it indicates intelligence also. And me, myself, I just could not go past the thought of Yimaya in this movie. And that's my piece for right now.
Well, that's interesting that you had mentioned Yimaya, because when the character Noah was speaking with his mother, right, in that movie, you noticed, and I think you had pointed out in a conversation we had about her wearing the blue veil, right? Now, something else I recall is that when he was talking to his mother, notice how she had like fish hanging around her, like they were preparing fish. So that connects you with the idea of Yemoja. Yemoja meaning the mother of the fish. Now, Yemoja also deals with the mystery of existence, the mysteries of the water. The water is representing the subconscious and the psyche, right? Or energy and motion helping to shape existence. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with the energy of Yemaya, you're connecting with the energy of care. So, of course, Noah, having that connection with his mother, and she's also, was a place of comfort for him as well. The mother brings forth comfort, but we also see that the water in the end of the movie have to wash away some of the corruption that accumulated on the planet due to what came under Caesar, or Proximus Caesar. And I'd like to talk about him a little bit more as well. Now, you mentioned May and how she came up forth, and at first she came across as mute, right? Now, something I want to go back to, because this is something very important. Humans. When you look at the word "hu," it means authoritative utterance, and man means mind. So humans have the ability to not only say what's on their mind, but communicate things in the universe with authoritative utterance, and which were connected to the idea of speaking into the primordial waters so things can come into existence, right? So as you speak, you utter. Keep in mind that we're still in the water, so it's still in the connection with the mother. So Yemaya represents the top of the ocean, but in a sense, Yemaya's presence is all around us in the form of the waters, because you need a certain amount of water in the air if you want to breathe, even if you want to live, and the concept of care. You can't get away from those if you want life to flourish. So another thing too, we talk about divine utterance. Yemoja also works with Ogun, right? In so many ways. Ogun protects Yemoja. And then there's also the concept of Ogun and Eshu working together. And they play a very large role in this movie as well. Now, let's say we're dealing with technology, right? You're dealing with your phone. When you speak to Siri or you speak to Alexa and so forth, and you're able to get their attention because you're connecting with that energy. That social media is connected with Eshu and Ogun. So you're dealing with the Orishas in that sense. Now, communication becomes a very important factor in this movie, right? Social media deals with not only these two Orishas and their ability to communicate, but also an ability to help human society advance. This is because it's telling in the movie, right? Communication is very important if you want society to flourish and advance and develop into a vast civilization. And also, the war between the two species, it indicates that whoever controls the technology becomes the dominant species on the planet. So, as far as going back to Yemaya or Yemoja, you get into the concept of connecting with the waters. You're seeing the blue, you're seeing the women wearing the blue because they represent the veil of the mysteries, and also keeping in mind that they still had to deal with being washed away from the waters when they tried to steal that technology and utilize it for something in a case of warfare. The mother's wrath is that she cleans away all negativity so that it can be brought forth anew. And also it's an allusion to the story of the flood that took place in the Bible, and not just the flood, but also, our favorite story, how they talk about the Africans followed the Hebrews out of Africa and how they tried to capture them and they got engulfed with the flood waters. You kept on seeing allusions to that, but I want to talk a little bit more about that in a later episode dealing with the biblical part of the story. So I can't talk about this enough, because Jemaya also plays a role in that. Olakun plays a role in that. Every time you speak, in order for you to be heard, there's oxygen, and there's also a certain amount of mist, and there's oxygen around you in which sound has to travel through, like mist, and have to amplify the sound, because sound needs a medium to travel. It can't just move in the vacuum, right? So this goes back to the power of speech. Humans lost their ability to speak, and apes begin to gain their ability to speak. So in the Orisha tradition, or the Lukumi, there's a saying, and that is, your tongue can either make you or break you. And with that being said, it's the utilization of the tongue, which discipline is to be emphasized. Now, when you get into the wisdom teachings, known as Odu Ifa and the Odu Ikameji, we are warned about self-hexing. Ikameji and Otora Meji speaks to the power of the word to make things manifest. Ikameji, however, talks about being able to control the power of speech to make things manifest, but being careful of what you say, not only about others, but what you say about yourself, and also what you tolerate of being said about you around other people. A lot of times you have to get away from those who is doing a lot of this because it can cause a lot of problems in your life. And then you have Oturameji. It talks about speech in the form of human language, which comes into being in the Ifa way of life. It deals with many, many, many disciplines, such as singing songs and prayers, and the ability to develop what is called Ofu Ashe, which is the divine power of speech. So we look into the Yoruba word, there's Ashe. People use that word a lot. Ashe literally means command. So in the movies, humans had this power taken away from them and they became childlike. But when the apes began to inherit speech and speak to each other, they became more powerful. As far as humans becoming childlike again, once again, they had to be re-embraced by the mother aspect to be nurtured and nourished, because you had two groups of humans. You had those who have been made feral, and you had those who were intelligent, but they were hiding underground, right? So Noah's people were able to communicate with the birds. Proximus Caesar, who is the villain in the rise of the kingdom of the apes, while holding Noah captive after he captured him, pulls Noah to the side and told Noah that humans with the ability to speak cannot be trusted. Now, one of the key factors in human evolution is our ability to speak. In the words we utter are thoughts that take the form of sound to articulate and show our ability to think. Hence, a Homo sapien, meaning a wise person, is to be a Homo sapien, is to be wise, the person. So you had Proximus Caesar in his character mimicking or trying to mimic Caesar, but he was speaking falsehood. He was taking Caesar's words and twisting them around, trying to take the teachings of the original Caesar and twist those teachings around for his own ends, right? So in the Yoruba tradition, Obatala is connected to gorillas. The silverback is a mature gorilla, kind of like the alpha male, who's a leader of the group, and he's the protector of his family. He's also wise enough to understand when danger is lurking, but he is also a fierce warrior when it comes to protecting the family. Now, a lot of times when the gorillas see someone that's about to get into a fight, they might do this. Right here, the thymus gland. If you knock on that, you're charged with the body, build up your immune system and everything else. This helps activate your life force by knocking on your thymus gland. Okay? And this is what gorillas do when they're about to get into it. So they're strengthening themselves, getting ready to fight. So we'll see that in the gorilla is a very patient creature, could be very gentle, but when it comes to defending their territory, they could be a beast. So you have an aspect of Obatala known as Ajaguna, who is Obatala the warrior, right? You don't want to trade punches with a gorilla, by the way. Obatala in the form of Ajaguna, they show him riding on a horse. You notice that the gorillas oftentimes are riding on horses, right? The gorilla is also mainly the head of their military in the kingdom of the apes, or that is in the planet of the apes. They have like a caste system of how you have the gorillas. The gorillas are military, the chimpanzees are the scientists. You got the orangutans, who are obviously connected to keeping the laws, making sure that the laws are being kept and so forth, you know. So Noah himself, he was a chimpanzee, but he's also from the tribe who are known as the keepers of the ego. They work with birds, and birds are sacred to the primordial mothers. And in Yoruba, it's called Ajay. The Ajay are women who have the ability to turn themselves into birds. And they meet in a sacred tree called the Iroko tree. You notice that the apes were in forested areas. In earlier movies, you learn that Caesar eventually fled to the redwood forest, where eventually they were able to take the rest of the apes and free his people, right? The scene in the forest is a very powerful one when you understand how sacred forests are to indigenous people. When you go by trees, you can actually connect with the spirit of the tree and trade energy with a tree to build your life force. There's a such thing as forest bathing. So when you go in forest, like in Japan, a lot of it's becoming very popular where people go in the forest and they'll stay among the trees and let the energies of the trees heal them, right? And this is something that's beginning to become more popular. Now, in African tradition, there's a such thing as Osayen for those who want to connect with the spirit of the leaves. Every leaf has medicine, but you have to learn about the medicine of the leaves. And if you're more in tune with the actual forest, with Ajala and Osayen, Ogun, Shango, Ochosi, connecting with these forces, they will allow you to learn the medicine in the forest, especially when you work with Osayen. The leaves are considered the children of Osayen. And without leaves, without green, there are no working with the Orishas because you have to utilize plants and everything else. When you look into ancient African tradition, trees and plants, trees were the oldest deities to be worshipped. And he's still doing echo to that around Christmas when you have the Christmas tree. Anyway, I want to go a little bit back into this power of speech because I cannot stress that enough, because it's the major reason how the apes were able to come up and humans going down. And with the power of the word, you see where not Caesar, but you see where Noah was able to communicate with the ego with sounds of power. Hence, the ability of tapping into various sound vibrations and mantras, the summoned spirit to defend you and protect you and shift reality in a way in which you will see as beneficial to you. Another thing that's important is understanding that when working with sounds of power, the monkeys and apes all have this sound, hoo, 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 right? Who is the sacred sound vibration? Who is the sacred sound vibration that is similar to Om? And you'll find this sound vibration utilized in not only the Yoruba tradition, but ancient Kemet and even Islam. So there's one chant when you hold your head, your Ori, you say Ori Hu, Ori Hu, Ori Hu, right? And Hu, like I said before, is authoritative utterance. If you chant this, try to go into meditation chanting Hu and see what you feel, how you feel like maybe in about 15 minutes. Just keep doing that, right? If you study Ron Ephraim's Medunetter Volume 1 and 2, and we're going to talk about that later, you see how he connects Orunmila with Tahuti on the second sphere. Reason why is because this is the higher wisdom faculty, and this sound vibration is connected to Tahuti, and in this case connected to Ori, and therefore connects you with Orunmila in that sense, because Orunmila is second only to Olodumare, and it is from Orunmila in which you get your messages. Orunmila also has another connection with a being called Ella, which is the spirit of purity. So when a Babalawo and Awo sits on the mat, they channel Ella, which is the spirit of light and purity, where information comes down into the person as they're giving someone a consultation. But Allah is also in constant communication with those who are open to receive messages. So you have that higher sense faculty. The apes and gorillas, for instance, like I said earlier, gorillas being connected to Obatala, and also the relationship between Obatala and Yemaya is very important because you're dealing with the mother and father principle. Obatala being in the form of the gorilla. Why? Because the gorilla in that region of the world was seen as the animal with the highest form of intellect. So when you're connecting with your intellect, you also have the ability to discern. Now in the movie, because humans had begun to lose their intellect and their ability to speak, the actual apes were beginning to look down on humans and see humans as not only secondary, but as wild beasts, okay? Another thing too, we mentioned earlier about how you shift reality. They said that Noah is the protagonist of this particular show. Before he could learn exactly how to do that, he ran into the character that Joyous Ram mentioned earlier called Raka, right? And Raka was kind of like the Orunmila figure. Now, to Raka, his Orunmila was Caesar. So what he was doing is he was literally preserving teachings of long ago and paying homage to Caesar as an ancestor. So Caesar, in this case, is an honored Egun, right? So Noah is the protagonist of this show and the main character. And even though he's from the same species as Caesar, which is a chimpanzee, he does not possess the courage. No, he possesses the courage, but he does not possess the knowledge or the intellectual development as Caesar has. Okay. He doesn't possess that type of intellect, but he does show many signs of courage. Like in the beginning of the show, he showed determination, right? This determination is in Irete Meji, or also in what we call Otoropan. That's determination as well as endurance. He showed both of these. He showed determination and courage by getting to a high ledge on a cliff towards the beginning of the movie. And it shows that he practiced balance in the universe and Ewa Puele, bringing balance and having balanced character and good character. And he followed the law of his people. So, for instance, when there were 3 eggs, he was saying, okay, well, we have to take 2, but we need to leave 1, because you're seeing that there's a respect for nature. So when you get into ancient African traditions, there was always that respect for nature. If you were supposed to take something, then you would give something in exchange, and they would call this an offering. So to understand much about this movie, you have to understand, or at least know about Caesar, which takes maybe 300 years after, before this particular setting. So Caesar had already passed away 300 years before Noah. He is still remembered as the liberator of his people, the apes. And it was Caesar who brought them to freedom from the human captivity as human civilization began to collapse and crumble. Now, Caesar is given the title, if you go back in history, to the emperor of Rome, right? And we see that Rome at that particular time period, when it was an empire that was thriving, Rome attempted to conquer the entire known world until it had its fall at the hands of the barbarians and internal stripes, which ripped it apart from within. However, Caesar was born from a mother who was an experiment herself, given the, I believe it was the AZT, ALZ 12, because it was meant to fight Alzheimer's. It was a vaccine. So when Caesar was born, his mother had been injected with the serum. So he was born with a very advanced intellect and was able to compete with humans in certain games and activities. And this would actually lay the foundation for him eventually breaking out his fellow apes. Now, Noah's people lived in the redwood forest. They were very connected to nature. They lived in redwood trees, which were considered sacred. Redwood trees are related to the cedar tree, and cedar trees are sacred to Shango, the Orisha of thunder, the Orisha of lightning, of dance, royalty, fire, as well as justice. Now, we go back to the villain, Proximus Caesar, who was a self-made king. He was actually more Ogun than anything else. Ogun is the Orisha of technology and warfare. So this is his energy. And generally, he had a gorilla as his general. It was Silva, right? And Silva, hence Silverback, he was the one who was actually a second antagonist to Noah, his people, who basically captured Noah's people and basically killed many of his village, including his father. So you see another mythos that you may be familiar with as a son avenging the father. But at the same time, Noah wanted to simply find his family. So Proximus Caesar had to tap into that power of technology. That's why he wanted it so bad. And he saw that Caesar had the talents to get the technology that was behind the vault in the silo that was kept by the humans at one point in time. So we see the power of Eshu, you see the power of Ogun. In order for his people to evolve, they had to tap into the power of those two Orishas, Eshu and Ogun. And if you pay attention, Proximus Caesar understood from his perspective that the time of humans had already been, it had come and gone, and now it's time for the apes. But they needed to evolve, and their knowledge of technology from human civilization was necessary in order to create an advanced civilization for the apes. See, now one very interesting character too that I can't stop talking about, who was a favorite in the movie, which and Joyous Ron brought him up earlier, was Raka. A little bit about Raka. Raka was the keeper of the records. He had been part of a group of adherents to the teachings of Caesar. However, even though he had access to ancient books, they were written by humans. But having been under the assumption that humans were actually backwards and not as smart as apes, he actually believed that it was apes who wrote those books. Now, you might say that he was the keeper of the mysteries, and he took Caesar, well, he basically took the teachings of Caesar to make sure that they were pure and uncorruptible. So he was kind of like the Arumala, or should I say the continuation of Arumala's teachings. So he would be like a Babalawo in that sense, right? However, he made sure that the teachings remained the teachings and that they would not be corrupted. So he had a lot of these things memorized. So he had an oral tradition. He became Noah's mentor and taught him how to practice good character, which is Ewapuele. So every indigenous culture have record keepers, as well as those who want to maintain the sacred teachings and pass them down from generation to generation. Raka was the only one left of his immediate affiliation. He also wore a Caesar symbol around his neck, which he eventually passed on to Noah. Noah was being pursued by a woman that was pointed out earlier by Joyce Ram, who they called Nova. Raka called her Nova, and interesting enough, Noah called her an echo. They called humans echoes, hence like an echo from the past. Anyway, they ran into this character by the name of Nova, kind of on a night after they had been captured, or no, they had been attacked. After she was attacked, she called out the name of Noah. She called his name out, and that's how he first said, "Hey, wait a minute, hold up. She's not as dumb as we thought she was." So it was around that time. If you look at Rise of the Planet of the Apes, you'll notice that they also had a Nova. Now, what's interesting about the name Nova, too, in Spanish, it means don't move. It means something that doesn't move. So I remember a friend of mine telling me years ago how they was trying to sell the Nova, which was a certain car that come out, and they was trying to sell it in Mexico, and nobody would buy it because they thought it simply didn't move. But Nova also is a star that has exploded and causes the sky to go bright. Now, of course, in this movie, Raka calls all the women Nova, as he says before, but it's also a nod to earlier movies. Okay, so the word Nova, like I said in Spanish, means doesn't move. Another thing too is Caesar's henchman, Caesar's Proximus, his henchman, the one by the name of Nova, who was caught by his henchman, who revealed that she could talk, had a secret. Okay, because she was actually there practicing the Orisha, or should I say the Ifa Odu Erete Meji, meaning stoop to conquer. Also, if you're familiar with the art of war, it talks about appearing less than what you actually are, so you can eventually conquer your enemy. So in the Yoruba teachings, Erete Meji, they have a phrase meaning stoop to conquer. And this is what May did. She stooped in order to conquer, right? And this is something that they're also teaching people who watch that movie about a strategy that they used on the ancestors in the Nile Valley. When Africa was attacked, they acted like they wanted to learn. And the minute they started learning, their numbers started accumulating, and eventually they end up taking over, or they end up raping and pillaging and so forth. This led to the burning of the great library, which was gathering up all of the known knowledge and wisdom of the ancient world around that time, where over 500,000 scrolls went up in flames, right? So a lot of our ancient civilizations, the way they would get attacked is the invaders would come in, and they'll come in as being humble at first. You would not be able to know that they had an agenda until it was too late, because they played the game so well, and often they had inside help, right? So there's a Yoruba saying that says, "Be not so kind unless an ancient enemy or an old enemy returns." So you're taught that it's important for you to have boundaries. There's nothing wrong with kindness, but also make sure that you're paying attention, because people will often take advantage of that in this particular type of world in which we live in. Now, Raka, being good-natured, he was going by the teachings of Caesar, and he was telling Noah that, hey, this human is cold. So what did he do? Even though that blue veil that blue blanket was for his mother, he was able to show compassion, and he gave it to May, in which she was able to wrap herself up in the blue blanket. Now, once again, you see the mother principle at work. You see the Yemaya principle at work, right? There's also a verse we're talking about being able to fortify yourself and protect yourself against those who come seeking and trying to take from you. Now, there's another verse that speaks about refusing to change and how it leads to destruction. So, being able to adapt is important. Humans went backwards while apes began to move forward. At first, you think that they may have represented the good guys, like, for instance, May, but she had her own agenda, and that was to maintain humanity and bring it back into being the dominant species. Noah, even though he may not have been the most knowledgeable of the apes, he was on to her, and he knew that something was up with her from the beginning, and eventually he confronted her. Another interesting thing is that after their captivity, after they were captured by Proximus Caesar, they were brought into an area. I believe this was inside of like a ship. And this is before we got to the actual silo. And they ran into a man named, I think his name is Treviathan or Travian. Anyway, he was actually helping the apes by teaching them technology and teaching the villain by the name of Proximus Caesar ancient Roman history. Again, you see this Roman history stuff. So he was basically teaching them how to build an empire, to imitate, mimic that is like Rome. This is why Proximus had him studying and teaching him all this stuff about Roman civilization. So when Amy, or May, I said Amy, when May came into the scene, she asked him, so you're going to teach him about Roman history, huh? And what he was doing is he believed that the time for humans had come and gone as well, and that he would be able to live the easier life, kind of similar to Cypress and Matrix. They believe that, hey, you know, okay, I may be selling out my own people, but I might as well join the winning team. So this led to him being taken out. She choked him out. Now, I don't want to tell you every part of the movie. I want some of you guys to go and see the movie yourself and have your own feedback. But speaking on this, you know, let me pass the mic to my sister Ishram if you have anything else to say about it.
We'll see everybody in part 2 of 3. That's my piece.
Okay. All right. You know, now you mentioned something else too. And I want to talk a little bit more about the mother when we come back in part 2 of 3, because it's very important. And this is dealing more with the Yemaya. And I'm going to show how Yemaya is connected to Aset and the veil of mysteries, you know, and why the women or the females were wearing the blue in that particular setting. Because blue is also the color of mystery. Blue represents the waters, and blue represents that which from all things emerge from. When you look into the night sky, it appears to be dark blue with the stars. When you look into the day sky, it appears to be blue. So blue represents the heavens, and blue in ancient Kemetic tradition, when you look at the sky, it was represented as a woman, Nut, who gives birth to the sun and swallows it up and gives birth to it again. So, with that being said, I'd like to welcome you to part 2 and 3, which is going to be coming up next. We're just getting started now. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the comment section. Until then, peace and blessings, and thanks for listening.